Bonjour, good morning. Thank you for being with us today. We're very excited to have an important conversation about honoring and elevating tribal and indigenous voices in conservation and land stewardship. My name is Alicia Luba. I come from the United States. I'm a daughter, a sister to 4 brothers, a mother of twins, a wife, a sister-in-law, an aunt, a niece, and a descendant of conservationists, landscape architects, artists, and colonizers. I currently serve as the Vice President of Resource Management at the National Park Foundation. I grew up on the land of the Pequot Nation and currently live on the land of the Massachusetts tribe. I'm honored to be here today with this esteemed panel who are willing to share their experiences, perspectives, and insights with us. As we all know, throughout history, tribal and indigenous nations have been at the forefront of land stewardship based on deep, holistic, interconnected, and enduring relationships with the land. However, for too long, these roles have been marginalized or overshadowed by Western models of conservation and land management. We are seeking to grow a movement towards recognizing and acknowledging indigenous knowledge systems and partnerships, as evidenced here over the past couple of days. But recognition alone isn't enough. Today, we'll hear about experiences in Canada, New Zealand, and the United States, and discuss reorienting our assumptions and practices to truly support and honor Indigenous knowledge, rights, and practices in land conservation and stewardship. We have an incredible panel today, and we're going to start by welcoming Patricia Solis, who will lead us in a land acknowledgement and a centering song before sharing her work. But first, let me introduce Patricia. Patricia is Maliseet from the Maliseet Nation at Tobique here in Canada. She is a mother, sister, aunt, great aunt, and cousin. Patricia carries teachings and understandings from elders across Turtle Island and is very grateful for the culture and ceremonies that she has been part of since her youth. Patricia has acted as a senior cultural advisor on many projects and was formerly the executive director of the Maliseet Nation Conservation Council. Patricia strengthened that organization by working with Maliseet leadership to address issues connected to watershed, aquatic relations, and marine life. Speaking on behalf of those without voice is important to Patricia, and she seeks to encourage others to utilize their cultural practices, like singing their ancestral songs, to empower others to reclaim their voices and spirituality and connect with their daily lives. Please welcome Patricia.
Kwe, Neldaliwis, Patricia Solis, Najayao Nagutguk. My name is Patricia Solis, and I am from Tobique First Nation. I am Maliseet, otherwise known as Wolastoqey, and I would like to acknowledge the lands of the Huron-Wendat that we are on today and gathering here, and have much appreciation and love for those fellow Indigenous peoples, and for all of you for being a part of our presentation today. I do just want to offer a song that comes from my territory, and it's actually in honor of our river, the Wolastoq, otherwise known as the St. John River. And that river is actually one of the longest rivers on the eastern seaboard. It's 640 kilometers long. And so there's habitat across the medicine line, as we call it, United States and Canada. And so we sing this song in honor of our relation, our river, and I share that good medicine with you this morning. Wolastoq Malagway, Ajire pamigu Wulastuko malagwe Zubegelmia Niguas pamipin Wazizichnil Niguas pamipin Wazizichnil Wulastupamalagwe Ajire pamigu Wulastupamalagwe Zubegelmia Niguas pamipin Wazizichnil Niguas pamipin Wazizichnil Willie went. Yes. All right. So I'll be presenting first, and just to share with you some of the, I guess, cultural knowledge that I bring forward. I put together a bit of a resource table that if you want to take a look once we're done with our presentations, feel free to. Just to let you know also that I've made a food offering for you. If you'd like to take an apple, there's apples on the table that you can take. And there is tobacco also on the table. If you want to take some of that in your hand, and you can go outside and make an offering to a tree or a bush that particularly resonates with you. And the offering, the reason why we do tobacco offerings, as I've been taught, is that we want to show spirit, our appreciation, and also for the land, for all that it is doing for us, how it sustains all of us. So that tobacco is in that basket there. And I have a number of books. I have a map of our territory that has many place names in our language. And the reason why I thought this was important to share this is so that everybody can get a sense that for us, conservation is not just a physical land conservation concept, that in actuality, I talk about conservation, it's about cultural conservation, it's about spiritual conservation, it's even about emotional conservation. And the reason why we have such a broad sense of conservation is because that's how our peoples always survived so well. We always conserved our energies through the long winters, into all of the seasons, and we know how to utilize our energies and our spirit in a good way so that we're aligned with the land and the waters around us. So like I say, this resource table is just kind of an extra effort, let's say, to help to try to bridge the gap or bridge any kind of understanding that we may be trying to glean from gathering together at this conference. So I will start with my slides if they're okay. So I had called my presentation Wujakiman Gamginsu, which is help me teach the lesson, so that you know, my life, the things that I've learned can come forward in a good way so that it may help you in your learning journey. So again, just to give you a sense, I am actually from a place that's further east of Quebec City. And so there's a neighboring province to Quebec. It's called New Brunswick. And our territory is basically along the Bay of Fundy and as well the St. Lawrence River that you see outside. And so typically for our people, our lands were always connected by our rivers. So often people think, oh, you know, water divides us. Well, in actuality, water connects us. And so to have that sense that we're connected via water is, I think, an important lesson to understand about how we understand and value the connection to our waters. So I just wanted to first start with an acknowledgement, and that's acknowledging Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of our lands and waters and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land upon which this conference is being held is the traditional unceded territory and sacred lands of the Huron-Wendat, Innu, and Abenaki peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of these territories, as well as the ongoing processes of colonialism and dispossession that are impacting us still. As we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples to these lands from time immemorial, we seek to indigenize our processes of conservation and preservation and offer space and enable Indigenous peoples a more empowered position. So for some of you, it may be new, this concept of protocol. And for a lot of our peoples, we carry protocols with us in everything that we do. So many Indigenous nations follow many levels of protocol, such as ceremonial protocol, spiritual protocol, language protocol, cultural protocol, community protocol, internation protocol, interpersonal protocol, and in the research world, research protocol, where Indigenous nations are leading on how the ownership, control, access, and possession, otherwise known as OCAP, is of environmental and traditional knowledge is to be conducted. And so essentially, many of our nations, many of our communities have created these research protocols out of necessity, because you may not be aware that our people, Indigenous peoples, are amongst the most studied research people in the world. And often it came at a great cost to our people because that knowledge was never respected in terms of belonging to ourselves and our nations. And so these research protocols are put in place as a way to conserve and protect our knowledges. Acknowledging protocol, knowing protocol, and honoring protocol is an essential element to establishing respectful relationships. Relationship building on protocol is the culturally sensitive and appropriate way of demonstrating care and concern for well-being. As a part of this protocol, I acknowledge our grandmothers and grandfathers for giving us our lives. So I just wanted to talk for a moment about an overview of my work currently with WWF Canada. Working with members of the Resilient Habitats team for WWF Canada, I am working on Indigenous data sovereignty. that aligns with WWF Canada's mission and vision to support Indigenous-led conservation, stewardship, and restoration, and threat reduction. This project is being implemented in parallel with WWF Canada's carbon monitoring community of practice to support requests from WWF Canada's Indigenous partners to convene an Indigenous-only space to share knowledge and Indigenous data sovereignty best practices, including but not limited to data sharing agreements, respecting consent processes for sharing and applying Indigenous knowledge and in research, and applied conservation settings, data management systems for environmental monitoring, and Indigenous knowledge systems. I hope to see the creation of a community of practice in Indigenous data sovereignty through an Indigenous-led partnership. Just to continue on, equitable nature-based solutions require a community-based collaborative approach that upholds and centers Indigenous peoples' land rights and values while acknowledging their leadership roles in the co-governance of high-integrity nature-based solutions data to achieve collective stewardship goals for lands and waters. WWF Canada is a leader globally and nationally in nature-based solutions data management, for example, the carbon maps, and seeks to embark on a process to establish an Indigenous-led community of practice that can support capacity building for Indigenous data sovereignty in nature-based solutions and long-term stewardship aspirations of Indigenous governments to implement the OCAP principles. So I would also like to mention at this time an overview of my work with the Restore, Assert, and Defend network. And this work was a part of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership, which grew out of the groundbreaking work of the Indigenous Circle of Experts report, which you've heard mentioned previously by other panelists, and it's called We Rise Together. And I strongly suggest, if you have not read that document, take a look at it at least, and get acquainted with some of the concepts like ethical space in there. Formerly acting as a member of the leadership group for RAD, I provided guidance and advice on the initiatives to bring together a network dedicated to Indigenous-led conservation that offers a path forward, one that addresses ecological devastation and envisions a powerfully connected future of living well together. The conservation and protection of biodiversity and the resurgence of Indigenous self-determination can go hand in hand. It is to create this vision that the RAD network has come together. They seek to research and share knowledge to answer the questions. What if Indigenous peoples were at the center of nature-based solutions and our rights and knowledge systems helped inform design and implementation? As well as what conservation finance pathways can secure Indigenous guardianship over lands, advance protection of biodiversity, safeguard Indigenous culture and knowledge, and create climate solutions. So previously, I was the executive director of an Indigenous-led conservation organization called the Maliseet Nation Conservation Council. And I guess really in terms of understanding that role, it was as a day-to-day manager. I was also involved with writing proposals and securing funding and really working with the community base in our 5 First Nations of our nation, and being able to work with leadership in a way that promoted our inclusion in the watershed management planning process. Because as someone described earlier, a lot of the decision-making that happens in regards to our lands and waters have already been made in processes that we are not consulted, let alone included in. So I did have the honor of being involved with writing an interim statement of cooperation between Environment and Climate Change Canada, as well as with 7 federal US agencies, which basically allowed for a process, a venue where our leadership could finally address directly the US and federal crown governments in the decision-making processes that were happening and are happening on our river. And so this was an important piece of the work that I did. And that agreement still stands, even though the cooperation, let's say, is not at the degree that we hoped it will. But I'm definitely hopeful that with changes happening throughout the conservation world, that will resonate with government to be more inclusive and respectful of our people. So just very quickly, some of the few lessons that I have learned about honoring and elevating tribal and Indigenous roles in conservation, stewardship, and interpretation. One of the, I guess, most important lessons that I've been learning is about two-eyed seeing. And of course, our elder, Albert Marshall Sr., who has been, accredited and acknowledged, actually, along with his wife, Merdina, created that two-eyed seeing concept, which has helped many of us, create spaces and create openings to bring in Indigenous knowledge systems into Western-based knowledge system decision-making processes. And so, a person really can't emphasize and give, a world of gratitude for that expression being created, because we have really needed to be able to bring in our knowledge systems. I think taking only what you need is key to understanding reciprocity and abundance. Respect, roles, responsibilities, reconciliation is also very important. And these are the types of terms that we use in our everyday work. Create solidarity, grounding, and connections. Grow collectively. I created a code of synergies and a statement of confluence for this data sovereignty work that we're working on. Do what you can with what you have, which is a lesson from, growing up, being in a community where we really pull together and share. Connect your spirit with the spirit of the land, the spirit of the waters, and the spirit of creation. Feel, trust, talk, believe, love, dance, sing, speak, pray for the lands and waters of our ancestors. Know that you never walk alone and that the salmon will save the world. Waliwan.
Thank you, Patricia. Really appreciate you sharing your learnings and your culture with us. So now it is my honor to introduce 2 wonderful women from New Zealand, Sylvia Hermata Willison. Sylvia has been the Chief Executive Officer of the Harea Trust in New Zealand for the past 25 years. The Harea Trust is a Maori organization established by the elders of the Ngāi tribe to strengthen tribal activities, focusing originally on rebuilding their ancestral home and meeting place. Project managing and administering the rebuild of the ancestral home is one of Sylvia's greatest achievements. Since returning to her home, Tauranga, in 1987, Sylvia has worked tirelessly in her efforts to support the development of her iwi. This has led to Sylvia taking on leadership roles, representing her iwi and haputu on numerous boards, including education, arts, culture, and community development. Sylvia currently represents her hapu on the Ngāti Raniniwi post-settlement government entity. a pan-tribal organization responsible for receiving, managing, and distributing redress from the Watiangi tribal claims settled with the Crown in 2012. Sylvia is joined by her daughter, Kylie Willison. Kylie holds a postgraduate certificate in Maori and Indigenous leadership from the University of Canterbury and a Bachelor of Resource Management from the University of Waikato. She has a background in local government and is passionate about community development, particularly hapu development. She is most comfortable with a spade or cutlery in hand, planting native trees, or setting tables at her mahi. Kylie is the general manager of Te Mahi a Nukuku, an organization established in 2022 with limited funding, a whole lot of passion, and a clear purpose of regenerating self-determination and self-governance within the hapu. Underpinning the passion and purpose is the history of Indigenous land confiscations and the ill treatment of her people following the battles of 1864. Te Mahi a Nuku has a vision to ensure the prosperity of our people and land now and for future generations. This will partly be achieved through the establishment of a native plant nursery, training, and contracting facility, focusing on empowering guardians and caretakers, protecting and conserving the natural environment for future generations. Kylie is committed to having a positive impact on her people through reclamation, reconnection, and regeneration of her land, people, and culture. So it is my pleasure to welcome Sylvia and Kylie, and with apologies for some of those words that I didn't pronounce quite right, but I appreciate you teaching me. Thank you and welcome.
Ko rangi nui e tuake nei, ko papa tuanuku e takoto nei, tēnā rā korua. Kia koutou te tangata whenua o tira ki ngā iwi take, me ngā kaiwhakahaere o tēnei kaupapa. Tēnā rā koutou katoa. Mihi mai rā kia māua, kua tai mai nei, mai I Aotearoa e. I runga I te karanga o te kaupapa e. Karanga mai, karanga mai, karanga mai.
Just to translate my mother's mihi, we acknowledge our primal parents, Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papa Tuanuku, Earth Mother. We thank you, the people of this land, the Huron, Wendat, Innu, and Abenaki peoples, our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and the organisers of this conference, the disruptors, the change makers for the work that you do in the conservation space. We have come from Aotearoa, New Zealand, to share and to learn, and we are privileged and full of gratitude to be here amongst all you beautiful people, representing our people, Te Iwi Māori, the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Tēnā koutou.
Mawaira e taurima te marae I wahone ma te tika ma te pono me te aroha e. Kia ora. Ko wai mātou a ngai tamarā waho. Ngai Tamarawaho are one of 8 sub-tribes that constitute the iwi of Ngāti Ranginui in Tauranga Moana. Located in an area of the Bay of Plenty, situated in the North Island of New Zealand, is a growing city named Tauranga, the landing or anchoring place. Ko wai, au. Ko mauao me puwhenua ngā maunga, ko Tauranga te moana, ko te waikare ao te kete kai, ko tāki timu te waka, ko Ngāti Ranginui te iwi, ko tamatea pōkai whenua te tangata, ko Ngai Tamarawaho te hapu, ko Huria te marae, ko Sylvia Willison ahau. Moao and Puwhenua are my mountains. Tauranga is my ocean. Waikare ao is the food basket. Takitimu is my ancestral canoe. Ranginui is my tribe. Tamatea pōkai whenua is my ancestor. Ngai Tamarawaho are my people. Huria is my ancestral meeting house. I am Sylvia Willison. I am here today to support my daughter Kylie and represent our hapu and our iwi. Our subject today focuses on Kōpūrererua Valley project, a project that we began way back in 2001. Thought to be audacious goals some 20 years hence, the session outlines the tangible achievements of Ngai Tamarawaho's vision. The outcome of our presentation today is an appreciation of a leadership process led by Indigenous peoples and how and why it has succeeded, and an explanation of what is happening as a transition to indigenizing the space. A fundamental part of the implementation of the Kōpūrererua Valley was to align the river system back to its original course to reflect the legend of our ancestor, Taurikura, and the formation of the river by the flick of her tail. Realigning the Kōpūrererua River back to its original course, establishing a specific funding trust to coordinate Tauranga service clubs, community contributions, with K-Valley as a priority. External fundraising each year continues 20 years on. Establishing a 364-hectare toxic, overgrown, weedy valley, failed grazing attempts, and conspicuous utility infrastructure. The valley now has a range of terrestrial and aquatic habitats with recreation, access, and improved neighbourhoods. Protecting and restoring multiple pa and archaeological sites, including work to restore the battle and retreat route of those wounded and interred from the Battle of Gate Pa. Introducing a cultural interpretation program, including carved po, panels, and guided cultural journey classes by Ngai Tamarawaho involvement. Providing a cycleway and off-road opportunity between the major ridges in Tauranga, linking the main western suburbs with the 2 main secondary schools and the main intermediate school. This includes a new cycleway bridge linking 2 peninsulas with each other over the toll road. Transforming intensive farming and poor land management into sustainable land management, resulting in the cessation of floodplain reliance through major engineering projects to support wetlands and restored swamps, both silane and freshwater. Extending community connection to the valley via their workplace or community planting days. Reviewed by Te Puni Kōkiri, the Ministry of Māori Affairs, this was co-designed long before the phrase had become commonplace. This project was co-governance and co-management long before that term was coined. Tangata Whenua led the initiation of outlining a process it could bring together, where success had historically eluded anti-dissent agencies. Example, Transit New Zealand, the Roading Authority, and draining boards, etc. With Ngai Tamarawaho leading the visioning process for the Valley, and with review support and investment assistance from Te Puni Kōkiri, a visioning process so intrinsically natural to tangata whenua showed the way for other agencies to align the extent of their mandated strategic and planning requirements. The Kōpirerua Valley project won Aotearoa's highest award for parks, the New Zealand Recreation Association's Outstanding Park Award. Furthermore, has served as a case study in New Zealand and Australia, United States, and tertiary institutions. Here we have our ancestor Tauri Kura. If you go back to the full map of K Valley, you get a sense, or forward, sorry, you get a sense of the shape, the outline of the valley. And that outline depicts, would you agree? Our Tauri Kura, a true paki waitara or story narrative of our tūpuna. She also is carved into our meeting house back at Huria Marae, and we are so very proud. She is a story that is shared right across Tauranga Moana, through the schools and the high schools. And it's all about us being able to share our narratives, to be able to share our history, and there is still so much to share. I'm going to hand it over to Kylie now. Thank you for listening. Kia ora.
Thanks, Mum. I'll wrap it up in about a minute. This is our tūpuna whare tamatea pōkai whenua, and this is the whare, our ancestral house that my mother had the privilege of helping to lead the rebuild of it back in 2004. So this is just a quick map of Tauranga. If any of you have been to Aotearoa, New Zealand, Tauranga is located in the Bay of Plenty, and it's called that because when the settlers came, the land was plentiful. We grew kai, we grew crops there, and very fertile soil. So they came there with that intention of settling there. This is just a few statistics on my people. So from the 2023 census, as you can see there on the right, there's a map just showing the land loss. 1840 was when our people signed the Treaty of Waitangi with the colonial settlers. By 1860, most of the South Island the land had been taken or sold onto settlers. And then by 2000, the little bits of green you see there is basically what is left of Māori land. And that's probably less than 5% of the land mass of Aotearoa is still in Māori ownership to now. My people in Ngai Tamarawaho, our population is 2,764 as at last year's census. Our Waira iwi Ngāti Ranginui, which is made up of 8 smaller tribes, us being one of them, is almost 15,000 in population. And we have a very young population. We have almost 60% of our people that are under 30 years of age. We have 10 marae across Tauranga Moana. We have 10 hapu. Our Māori population is almost at 1 million, almost at 20% of the population of New Zealand now. Again, under almost 50% of our people are under 25 years of age. And we have 1,300 marae or community places across New Zealand and more than 100 tribes. So that's just a little bit of a glimpse. This here is, if we look back, this is what our home looked like. And you can see in the foreground there, at the back, sorry, is our maunga mauao. And that actually was returned to the 3 iwi of Tauranga in 2008. The awa that weaves its way, or the stream, is Waikareao. In the middle there's a little island, that's Motuopai. That's where our ancestors are buried. That's our graveyard, or our urupa. And then just in the foreground is Huria. That's where our marae is today. And the stream weaves its way out of the picture to the kōpū rererua, the subject of our kōrero today. This is our Waikareo today. That is Moa in the background. It's good to see, so you can visualize exactly what we're talking about. This is Motuopai. This is our urupa in the middle of our estuary. Once upon a time, our estuary fed us. It was white sands, no longer that way. It is silted up. It is brown now. But we still bury our people there to this very day. This is the Kōpū Rererua Valley. The lines through the middle, the coloured lines, represent the track, some pathways, and also the Kōpū Rererua Awa, which flows through that valley. Once upon a time, that valley was a huge wetland system. You see now, either side, it's urban development. So the river was much wider than that once upon a time, drained for farming and for the things my mother talked about earlier. I'm just going to put on a very short video of 2 minutes now. It's a couple of years old, but it gives a good overview of the project. So thank you.
I'm really excited about this project. It's going to benefit the catchment, the valley, and the community that recreate in this area.
We feel real privileged to be chosen as a contractor to work on this. It's a keystone project for the city, for what the community can get out of it at the end of the day as well. So we just finished the end of the first earthworks season. Things are tracking really well. We've got another season still to come, kicking off in around September. We're going to be bringing in some cranes and some large equipment in order to put these pedestrian bridges up. Allows the community to really access the stream alignment.
So we've planted already 40,000 plants, and this is part of 250,000 plants just for this one little part of the project. 20 years ago, we started off with the hapu's leadership to provide a vision for the valley. The Ngāi Tamarau continue to lead in this space. This year in November, at the National Rivers Conference, the hapu are presenting on iwi leadership with river restoration. That's really special, and we're being recognised now as a community for doing something way ahead of that climate change curve, and it's nice being first off the rank and delivering. So well done, the hapu.
I always love it coming from the city, from our office space. I love nature, I love birds. I'm a horticulturalist, I love plants. You know, you come down here and you feel like you're out in nature. It's just amazing.
So behind us, we intend to build a large sedimentation wetland, and that will kick off this summer. We know that wetlands are great in terms of providing habitat and biodiversity for native fish and native birds, but we also know that they assist with building climate change resilience. We know that wetlands act as a bit of a filter and a sponge and assist with improving water quality, so that is a big focus of ours.
Thank you. That video is actually 2 years old. All the planting, I was in that video planting along with some of my whānau, my family, and all those plants have fully grown. There's no longer dirt there. The valley and the realignment, which that was one of the realignments, that's fully grown, and our community are just enjoying the valley and some of the work I do. So just acknowledging, this is my grandfather. Morehu ngā toko rahipere. And it's really because of him that I'm here today. He was a great leader of his people. He was a doer. He just got in there and did things. And he really paved the way for me to do the work I do today. So must acknowledge our elders. Me hoki whakamuri kia haere whakamua. That's about acknowledging the past before you move forward, always looking back. This is one of our leaders, Maharai Winiata. He held a PhD from Edinburgh University, died very young, but this is his proverb, which provides guidance to us through to this day. This is Te Mahi Anuku, this is my kaupapa, and this is our vision. This is some of the work we do. This is the realignment of the kupu rererua. This is a training program that we run through Te Mahi Anuku with our people. Of course, we train them. It's really about revitalising our culture as much as it is about the land. By looking after the land, we're also revitalising our culture, which is where our language and our beliefs and everything, our values come from. That's kumara, sweet potato there. Some of our students learning about growing and digging it out. And that's one of our kuia, one of our elders, Auntie Julie, teaching our students and our kaitiaki their language, revitalising it. This is the nursery, a few pics from the nursery, and it really is the catalyst for regenerating that self-determination and self-government within my people. We eco-source our seedlings from home and we plant them down in the Kupu Rererua Valley on our pā sites that we manage. We also have a contract to grow 150,000 plants for a new highway that's going through Tauranga. And then this again is the awa. This is some of the research we're going to do going forward. There's an abundance of kai food that our ancestors used to eat. Although the river's been polluted, it's still abundant. Our environment is so resilient, more resilient than us as people. And this is Puke Toromiro Pā, one of the main sites in the valley that we maintain through our Mahi Te Mahi Anuku. We have a direct contract with the council and they pay us to look after our ancestral land and to grow plants on it. So this is where I usually am, is out cutting gorse on the pā with a weed eater, planting plants. This is a restoration project we worked with another iwi on, building our capability and connecting with the land. Kia ha te mea nui o te ao, what is the most important thing? He hononga ki ngā mea katoa. It's relationships, it is connections with the land, with people. Kia ora.
Sylvia, Kylie, thank you so much. That was really incredible to get a glimpse into the work that you're doing and the leadership that you've provided for your community. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce our last speaker, Dr. Ken Lucero. Dr. Lucero is a proud member of the Pueblo of Zia, hailing from the Pueblo of Cochichi. He's dedicated to improving the health and welfare of his people and all tribal communities. He is the Tribal and Indigenous Lands Director at the Trust for Public Land in the United States, where he supports tribal and indigenous communities and their efforts to reconnect to their ancestral lands, to honor tribal sovereignty, and maintain Native culture, language, and traditions. Dr. Lucero will discuss incorporating traditional knowledge into conservation strategies and advancing important dialogues within pockets of the conservation and philanthropic communities who view conservation in the context of public access and easements. As part of this conversation, Dr. Lucero will highlight the critical role of TPL's partnership in facilitating land-back programs and discuss the largest land return in U.S. history between a non-government organization and the Penobscot Nation, and the historic agreement between TPL, the Amamutsun Tribal Band, and the Amamutsun Land Trust to revitalize and empower Indigenous communities. Please welcome Dr. Ken Lucero.
Quatsi hopa, yo paikum si trans, juna hanuch mapel, da se si trans. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Ken Lucero, and I'm from the Pueblos of Zia and Cochiti Pueblos in New Mexico. I'm really pleased to be here with you today to talk a little bit and very quickly about the work that I'm doing with the Trust for Public Land and the initiative that they have started about a year ago, which is called the Tribal and Indigenous Lands Initiative. The organization has always worked with tribes in the past. It's been in existence for about 50 years now, and off and on has really done tribal projects in an opportunistic mode or model. But the board of directors finally said, and by the help of tribal leaders, it was time to be more deliberate and more intentional about its work with tribes and really engage in the work of land return or land back for tribes and tribal organizations. So as I said, I was brought on about a year ago to help to establish this initiative. Although there were previous versions of the initiative in the past, most notably a past director was Chuck Sams, who is now the National Park Service Director, was also in this position and helped to foster and to grow a number of projects that happened prior to me joining the organization. I just want to start real quickly with just giving a little context for why I feel this is so important, and it's important work for me personally, is really, again, just telling the story about historic land loss, like was shared with many of the other presentations throughout the past couple of days. The United States was no different in the land loss and the taking over of lands. By 1880, tribes had lost almost 2 billion acres versus via treaties to the United States, and leaving just 138 million acres under tribal ownership. And even beyond that, by 1962, despite binding treaty obligations, 2/3 or 90 million acres of this already diminished land was lost through federal allotment and termination policies, which include some of the national park acts, where tribes were removed from areas that were considered too pristine to be occupied by any human. And so tribes and indigenous people were removed from these lands. So as a result, Native American nations today retain just 2% of their ancestral lands. So today, many of the 574 federally recognized tribes are really making an effort, concerted effort, to return those lands back and reclaim those lands back to themselves. Unfortunately, there are many challenges that they face in trying to do this work, including tribes are not eligible or only eligible for a handful of public or private funding programs for land acquisition. There is a growing, I think, emerging willingness for the public and for private foundations to engage in this type of work. So I'm really heartened by that. But traditionally and historically, it's been very difficult to have access to these funding mechanisms in order for tribes to essentially buy back their own land. Also, tribes often lack the specialized resources and capacity to manage land acquisitions. Oftentimes, it takes really complicated real estate transactions and other mechanisms working with county, state, local jurisdictions to accomplish many of these land transfers. And federally, in addition to that, I'll be speaking a little bit about some of the other work that we do in regards to schoolyard projects. But in that context, federally managed tribal schools receive limited public funding and are barred from receiving public funding, private funding. So this is a really big challenge when we're trying to make improvements to tribal schools and tribal schoolyards because of the resources restrictions. And so in addition to the 574 federally recognized tribes, there are a number of state recognized tribes and tribes that had signed treaties with the United States government, but the United States Senate did not pass them or confirm them. And so they were left without a treaty. This happened quite often in the state of California. So a little bit about the Trust for Public Land. As I said, we're an organization that was established 50 years ago, and its primary purpose is land conservation, and really with the caveat of land for people, hoping to provide access to people, to lands, to be able to engage and enjoy and be a part of the stewardship and ownership of these lands. We do these in 4 main areas, which are lands, trails, schoolyards, and parks. As I said, I was brought on about a year ago to start up the Tribal Indigenous Lands Program Initiative. And over this past year, I've created what I call 5 pillars for success. And these pillars for success are all based on developing relationships with tribes and indigenous communities, like-minded non-government organizations, federal agencies, health agencies, and academia. Secondarily, I think developing education plans internal for our organization so we can educate our staff about the historical land loss, federal Indian policy, and other important things that have come up with the administrations within the United States and within the states that are important for them to engage and to be knowledgeable about, to make us better partners with tribes and tribal organizations throughout the country. Public policy and growing public funding. Chief Ann and I have had several conversations about how to increase access to the Land and Water Conservation Fund that she spoke about during her presentation. And so we're also helping to help to create more legislation that creates better access to that funding. As she said, it's a $900 million annual appropriation, and tribes hardly ever access and create any of those programs underneath their reservations. So we're really hoping to increase that access. And what's really difficult is that there's often requirements for public access and requirements for conservation easements on those lands, which is not a lot of times compatible or liked by the tribes. So as Trust for Public Land, as an organization, we do not require any conservation easements for the tribal work that we do, nor do we require public access. And in working with tribes and in partnerships with the tribes, we allow them to make that decision as their sovereign right and sovereign authority to do that. So they may be willing to work with public funding or other sources of funding that require these easements. But as an organization, we will leave that decision up to the tribe to decide whether or not they want to go down that path. And if they don't, we'll seek alternate resources for these funding projects. Also, it's very important is Indigenous workforce, not only bringing in workforce from people that are in high school, college graduates, but also looking at people that are looking for a second career. Oftentimes, our Indigenous populations have really good knowledge holders within their communities that have worked, have retired, and now are looking for that second job and something so meaningful as land return for them, and to educate and to share with conservation organizations and with themselves and their own community about land return and the history of those lands, I think is a really important intersection. So we are actively looking to create a program that we can bring them on as interns, 2-year meaningful internships. So they're not just your summer program internships, but again, something that's meaningful that they can educate themselves and learn more about conservation and what it can mean looking forward. And then finally, the last pillar for success is really about technical assistance within our organization. We have about 360 employees spread out among, I believe it's 30 states. So we have a number of folks that maybe aren't necessarily familiar with working in tribes, but have a willingness to work with those tribes. And so providing that technical assistance for them, I think, is important for them to engage as a good partner and for us to develop more tribal projects. This is just a map quickly about some of the projects that we've done in the past. We have more than 100, we've worked with more than 100 tribes and indigenous communities in a variety of projects relating on, that have resulted in land return. What we're hoping to do is that we can do an analysis of a handful of these projects and go back and find out if the intent of that land return was met, if the tribal communities are better off, and what we did that was good and what we did that wasn't so good, so that we can learn from our mistakes and then develop better relationships and, again, better partnerships with tribes. The current land projects that we have, we're working with 22 federally recognized tribes in 14 states with 30 land return projects. These lands have a fair market value of over $200 million and an incalculable value to the tribes and indigenous people who have called them home for millennia. Some of the examples are Penobscot Nation in Maine, Cow Creek Band in Oregon, the Klamath tribes in Oregon, the Ama Mutsun tribal band in California, and numerous Native Hawaiian projects in Hawaii. So one of the projects I want to highlight that is currently ongoing is what we call is called the Wasatech Project with the Penobscot tribes in Maine. This is a nearly 30,000 acre land return to the Penobscot Nation. We are engaged right now in what we call a buy and hold transaction. The Trust for Public Land went out and financed the project, $32 million, and are currently holding that property as we fundraise in partnerships with the tribe to fundraise the funding that eventually, hopefully within the next 5 years, we'll be able to then fully raise the $32 million and then turn the lands over to the tribe. And again, that's without any restrictions coming from our organizations. This is a really important project in Maine in that it really helps to connect and bring access to areas that were formerly restricted from the public and from the tribe, and also connects to a national monument that has been created up in the northern region of the state. Another important project that we're working on is we have an MOU with the BIE, Bureau of Indian Education in the United States, to develop 9 schoolyard projects. Secretary Holland, or the United States Secretary of the Interior, visited one of our projects that we had done in Oregon and was really impressed by the work that we had done. And that eventually resulted in this MOU with the BIE to have these projects happen that you see here on the map. And just real quickly, I want to talk a little bit about the initiative priorities that I have going on. I think the most important one is our tribal engagement policy. I'm working with our staff and a handful of really dedicated staff to put together what we consider, it's like a tribal consultation policy, but since we're not a government organization, we're calling it an engagement policy, but it's really about setting rules and standards and guides for how we engage with tribes and what we intend to do when we work with them, including reaching out to them first when any project happens in their ancestral homelands and having a conversation with them about, do they have concerns about the project? Do they want to have a partnership in that project? Do they want to have that land themselves? And so it's important that we have all that. We're working with tribal leaders on developing that. And it's an ongoing process that we hope will help us. And we're willing to share that with other organizations to develop better relationships and a guidebook for how to do that work with tribes and non-government organizations like Trust for Public Land and other conservation organizations. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. If you feel the way I do, with just an incredible depth of expertise, insight, and experience from our panelists today, I'm going to ask one question for the response of the panel and then open it up to the audience to ask questions and share your own experiences. We've heard about the incredible work that these folks here have been doing, and essentially they're leading this shift in our approach to conservation. And I'd like to talk a little bit about shifting power dynamics and mindsets. And I'd love to hear in your experience, and Ken, I think you touched on this kind of quite specifically in your remarks about your organization, which is a private nonprofit NGO, making the decision to not pursue traditional Western restrictions on the land, and instead to give it unencumbered back to tribal nations. So I'd love for each and any of you to talk a little bit about the work that you've done in helping your partners understand your cultures and your approach. And are there specific things that you might recommend to some of the people in the room that could help them in shifting their own mindsets and the power dynamics that they bring to the table in trying to do this important work? I don't know if anybody wants to start with that. But.
I think I'll go ahead and just offer quickly, if any of you are from conservation organizations or are affiliated with these organizations, but I think probably the most important thing that you can do is hire someone in this position, in the position that I've been hired at. I am not a liaison. I am a director of a national initiative in administration in the headquarters office. And so you need to have Indigenous people in these positions filling these roles that you can get a true understanding and true feeling about what the direction is. I like to believe that I have a good connection to my own tribe and my own understanding about our historical land loss, but also relationships with tribal leaders across the country that will help me and guide me in the development of these policies and the way that we're going to work with tribes in the future. I would also recommend having Indigenous board members. We currently have two very highly respected tribal leaders on our board. Jody Archambault who was a former White House advisor under the Obama administration, and Alvin Warren, who has headed up a number of organizations and initiatives, including some in New Mexico with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Kellogg Foundation as well. So it's important that you put Indigenous people in these positions with authority to make decisions and to help to guide policy for your organization.
Great. Thank you, Ken. If we could get both the microphones working, that would be terrific.
Can I just add quickly
Yes.
to that? Absolutely support what Ken's saying. The other thing too is to resource those positions, the people that you put in those positions, to adequately resource them to be able to do their job, to engage properly, engage respectfully with Indigenous peoples. Often our Indigenous people are called to the table, but they're not even resourced for the knowledge, the contributions they bring to the table. They're sitting there, not paid for the work that they do. Their knowledge, their history, their culture is valuable. So make sure that that is resourced too. I think another thing is holding hands with them. Often in our experience, it's a foreign, sometimes they don't know what to do, simply don't know what to do, and they're a bit scared. So we have to hold their hand and guide them and walk together with them, as you know, as hard as it can be, because we have multiple hats as Indigenous people. We don't just wear one hat. So we have to sometimes guide them in the right direction and actually tell them and show them, this is how you need, this is what we want, this is how you need to do it. Yeah, and also induct them, educate them, bring them to the marae, bring them to your places, so that they experience your culture and can gain a better understanding of Indigenous cultures. Yeah.
Kia ora. I'm just going to go a little bit to the right or left wing, whichever way, and I'm just going to go on a very quick journey around protest and how protest brought our history, our experience of loss of land to the forefront in our community. And it took that protest to actually wake up the city and say, no more, no more. You can't do that to us anymore. And we want to try and call back what we lost as a result. The passive approach, because of that, has been these words called mana whenua, the people of the land. So Tauranga City is very much built on our land, on Ngai Tamarawaho's land. That's the grievance we have in our settlement process. But we might have lost our land, but our mana gives us a voice to be able to infiltrate some of the negotiations that still continue to happen on our land and gives us an opportunity to input into decision making. Kia ora.
Patricia, you want to add?
Maybe just briefly, make space, like kind of stand aside, make space so that Indigenous peoples can take space and speak what needs to be spoken. I find a lot of times in engagement and I guess to some degree inclusion, there's this thought that, well, you know, we'll carve out a little spot in our agenda, or we'll, you know, do the performative opening and closing. And you really, as Ken spoke to, we need to be in spaces where we can actually be part of the process and decision-making process. So I agree completely.
Thank you all very much. So I'm going to open it up to the audience now. I'll bring the microphone around. If you want to raise your hand, and you can ask any questions of our panelists. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and where you're from, that would be great.
My name is Alina Engest. I work with the Trust for Mutual Understanding, and I'm a board member of the Colorado Plateau Foundation, a Native-led organization based in Flagstaff. And my question is more directed to Dr. Lucero. When you mentioned the need to bring Native people into leadership positions within our organizations and onto our boards, we saw this need about 7 years ago in our organization. We realized that we were not giving to Indigenous-led organizations or to Indigenous communities directly, though our grants were affecting these communities directly. So we wanted to bring Indigenous people onto our board. We had a hard time thinking about whether we were an organization that they would feel interested in lending their time to or safe in entering, because for 35 years, we were an all-white board, all-white staff based in a city of New York City. So my question is, some of us come from places like that are trying to change. We ended up recruiting 2 Indigenous board members at the same time. We thought that would be better than just bringing one in to the room. I don't think we did a good job of preparing our organization or space for that change. There were some very racist and insensitive remarks and jokes made, to be honest, and it was a bit horrifying. And just wondering, for those that haven't made that step yet, is there anything you can say to that in preparing an organization to take that step so that missteps aren't made?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point that, you know, it's not an easy step doing that. I mean, you have to look at the history, hundreds of years of colonization and settler colonialism mindset, and giving up that authority and that power and control within an organization like that is not easy. And so when you invite or make space for other people, Indigenous people specifically, it takes time, and that's one thing that is frustrating. because you want to get and you want to do it right now, and you want to, you know, get on your way to doing the good work that you have a vision for. But oftentimes that needs work with the board. It's time, you know, maybe to look at your board and its makeup and retire some of your board members, and bring on new board members. I think there's a lot of resources available to help, you know, to facilitate boards and board membership, if there's a desire to do that. And I'll say that, you know, I'm willing to share, you know, the experience and kind of how we went through that process. You know, because the decision to hire me and the decision to create this position was not done by me. I'm the result of that decision. And so there was some forward thinking and other folks on the board and within our organization that had that mindset, and they did that work. But I know that I'm willing, and we are willing to share and help anybody that wants to make that transition to doing that.
Anybody else from the panel want to add to that? Any other questions from the group?
Hello, my name is Erin Dan from the Métis Nation of Alberta. I think I have a question for Kylie. I was interested in the nursery you guys have developed. The plants you grow in there, are they just plants primarily for riverbank restoration, or are they also plants, you grow plants for cultural use that are usually either for food or medicines? Yeah.
Great question. At the moment, we received some funding from the government, to capital funding to help us build the nursery, a grant. But to keep it operating, yeah, we had to secure contracts. So I have secured about 3 contracts, which will probably be worth close to $750,000 over the next 3 years. So they're specifically for projects. Wetland restoration is huge, is a huge part of it. They're all native plants. They all have medicinal purposes and special value to us back home. Some of them are only found back home where we're from. But also because the nursery is really in its first year of inception, so we've supplied, this was our first year of supply, we supplied 5,000 plants to our roading project. And every year we have planting projects on our urupa, for example, the island in the middle of the estuary. We plant 1,000 plants there every day during Matariki, which is a cultural festival for us. And also, we grow plants for council as well. So once we're growing the native plants really, really well, alongside that, I'm a gardener, so I love growing food. So I grow them both. And the goal is not to just grow native plants, it's to grow our own food and build that food sovereignty back into our people, because we used to, many years ago, we were known for growing kumara, sweet potato, in the bay, in Aotearoa, and we had multiple varieties of it. Today, we don't do that. All of that knowledge has been disrupted. So we're trying to regenerate that through the nursery as well. It's very much about food sovereignty, as well as planting out the land and recloaking.
Thank you, Kylie. One more.
Hi, my name is Rosemary, and I'm connected through my husband to the Odinata Foundation, which is an Australian not-for-profit organisation. And I just wanted to add something to what Alina was asking you guys. And first of all, thank you so much. I've sat here in tears. But something that the Odinata Foundation did, and they do have Gail Reynolds on their board, who is a First Nations person from Western Australia, from the Dallarat community. organization. She does this, to say leadership program is a bit, wouldn't be right, but it's an immersion. It's an immersion, and it's a confronting immersion, and she does it all around Australia. And so what Nigel did was get his staff, his investors, board members, and other people that he wanted to have this exposure to this program. And it went over 2 days. And and I was at home with my daughter who had a young baby. And each night our other daughter, my son-in-law and Nigel would come home with these incredible stories. But one of the things that actually made me think they're doing it right is that they broke up the two groups, because I think it was about a group of 20, I think. They broke up the group into 2 groups and put Nigel as an elder and another man, Tim Flannery, who is a big noted person in Australia for climate change. And they were the elders, and the First Nation Aboriginal people were the white people, and they came to them as people saying, all right, we want your land, we're going to put a mining on your land. This is what we do. You work it out, you tell us what you want and come back to us. And it was really confronting for them to be challenged to have to work in that way. And it completely changed them all. So that was just one way, if you can find someone who could do that sort of immersion for because it throws them and makes them to look at the other side really quickly.
Thank you for that. I think we're going to wrap this up. I do want to say, add a little bit, if I may, on these questions. And for those of you who are with funders who have the opportunity to participate in this space, one of the things that we're doing at the National Park Foundation, in addition to actually compensating the tribal and indigenous communities for their time in participating in our conservation projects, we're also paying for education. So we've helped to support the creation of a tribal consultation training program that is now being offered to all of the National Park Service staff across the country, so that those people who are out in the field and working in parks know how to approach, respect, appreciate, develop the relationships that are necessary for a respectful partnership and consultation. So just a thought there are some good models. One of the things that we've done today is to try to model what it looks like when you are honoring and elevating the voices of people, the First Nation people who were here long before us. And I am just so grateful to each of you for sharing with the generosity that you have of your cultures, your experience, and your expertise. So I'm going to hand the microphone back to Patricia, and we're going to do 2 things just to wrap it up. We're going to talk about and do a gift presentation, which is part of a very traditional process for many communities, and then end with a song. Greetings.
Yeah. So as Alicia just mentioned, for a lot of our cultures, generosity is one of the most highly regarded value. And so we traditionally, from where I'm from, we share gifts for spending time, for acknowledging, I guess a transformation of heart and mind just by sharing and really learning and caring about how other people are and where they're coming from. And, you know, this idea of gifting to recognize you're bringing your spirit into a space is integral as a sign of respect. And so I did just prepare a very small token of my appreciation for spending time with you all and getting to hear some about your work. And the other thing was to offer the table, a resource table of sorts, to everybody who's here. I indicated I made a food offering. There's apples. If you want to take an apple, feel free to do that. And I also have tobacco. And we use tobacco, again, as this sign of respect to spirit for everything that we've experienced and for showing that regard for the land and the water. And that's just in a basket. And typically what we do is when we're taking our tobacco in our left hand, that we're putting an intention of gratitude and love and appreciation. And then we offer that back to the land. So at a tree, at a bush, something to signify that. And so you're welcome to take some tobacco and go outside and do that. And as well, a number of books and a map with our languages on it to indicate our place names. And as I had said before, you know, this table represents, you know, that for us, conservation isn't only about physical land conservation or marine conservation. It's about the connection to everything that is provided to us. So I will present the gifts, and then I understand that Alicia, you have a gift as well to present, and then we will wrap with a closing song.
So I'd also like to present a gift to our speakers today. Typically, I would make something, food or a shrub or a something, but because of distance, time, flights, etc., I have brought something to that represents where I am from. And so it's very small, but what they have here is a keychain that's a lobster claw. I live in Boston, and lobsters are often considered as a symbol of Massachusetts and the area in which I live. So I wanted to share each of that along with my deep appreciation for each of you.
So we have a number of songs, as many of our communities and nations do across Turtle Island, across the world. And one of our songs is a friendship song. Maybe folks don't know, our people sign peace and friendship treaties. And so we sing this song as kind of a gathering song to just honor that friendship that we have between each other. And I just want to offer that to you now.
Thank you all once again for joining us for this presentation, and to all of you for the work that you do. I hope you will take away some of the teachings that we were very generously given by this panel. So thank you.